Hello, it's Rory Cohen, the coach for Mentor, and we are talking about a coaching skill today called strengths-based coaching. I want to talk a little bit about what strengths-based coaching is. There's a movement in psychology called positive psychology, happiness psychology. Strength-based coaching is really an offshoot of that. So, strength based coaching is an applied positive psychology that comes from we'll talk a little bit more about him later, but Martin Seligman from Penn was one of the people to really consolidate this idea and put it into a psychology that could be studied and taught. But the two main things that we want to pull out of this for this one skill is that it's collaborative, meaning you work with your client, patient, participant. If you're a psychologist, you call them a client. In coaching, we call them a coachee or a participant. It's collaborative, so we work together. It's not top down. It's generated by the client, and it's also solution focused. So we're not working on problems. We're not working on my mother beat me or I had a horrible childhood and that's why I can't move forward. We're sort of looking at, well, given what given what is true about your life and your circumstances and the outer world, what can we do? What positive steps can we take? So it keeps us focused on the positive. And there's all kinds of research now. Again, you can get PhDs in this stuff. So we're just touching the top of the iceberg. This is only a 15-minute coaching skill. But just to implant the idea that when we focus on what's working, we focus on positives, we focus on strengths, people tend to do better. And there's all kinds of research to back this up. So again, the key concept of that coaching, positive coaching psychology, and also strengths-based coaching for our clients is that we focus on what our clients are good at, what the participants good at, what are their strengths, what are their talents and their skills and what they know about, and how to build on those to create what they want. It's like if you have a bad habit, for example, you have a habit of overeating. It's a lot easier to instill a new habit, a positive habit of eating healthy foods than it is to stop eating or to stop eating a particular kind of food. So it's easier to create a new habit that's positive than it is to stop an old habit that's negative. There are lots of tools out there to help you identify what a person's strengths are. In the business context, we use this a lot in terms of building teams and increasing employee engagement. And so if you're interested in this, there are some things that you can use to test your own strengths and also test the strengths of your participant. These are more things like, are you good at details, or are you good at managing people, or it helps you figure out what kinds of strengths you have that could be applied to a team, but it's also really helpful in working just in a coaching context. So we'll again talk more about that in a bit. So what you focus on is what you create. Let's talk about that concept for a minute. This is critical in a coaching context. An example in October of 2013, of Psychology Today, I was reading that, and it talked about a study that showed that between 60 and 70% of an average student's spontaneously occurring thoughts are negative. 60 to 70% of our thoughts are negative. And that's in sharp contrast to what they expected. They expected 60 to 75% of their thoughts to be positive. Most people think they're positive. They think that they stack up well against other people. But when they're really brutally honest and evaluate the thoughts that come into the head unbidden, they're not things that you create, but they're just noise that occurs in your head. 60 to 70% of those are negative. And again, this is subconscious, it's spontaneous, we're not creating it. It probably comes from the part of our brains that are responsible for the amygdala, which is the fight or flight. It's the part of the brain that's scanning the environment to decide if what is happening is good for us or bad for us, whether we're in danger or not. And so this is happening in all of our brains all of the time. But as we increase in self awareness and emotional intelligence and spiritual intelligence, we're able to notice the feelings that come with those thoughts, the feelings of rapid heart rate, the feelings of stress. We're able to notice the thoughts that we have, like I can't do it, or I'm not going to do it, or I don't want to do it. These are all kind of thoughts that follow those feelings of stress. And we're able to put our intelligence over our emotions and make different choices. So, focusing on what's wrong is a learned behavior. It comes naturally from our amygdala, from our brain that's scanning the environment for things that are wrong. But then giving a voice to that and learning to focus on that is learned. It's learned from our parents. You know, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, uh, and then we continue to navigate that as we age. So when we focus on what's wrong, all we see is more wrong. It's harder to see what's right when we're focusing on what's wrong. And even the whole idea of right and wrong, black and white, this or that, those strong polarities are from a pretty low level of consciousness. They're, again, just a step up from the fight or flight. As we become more self-aware and more emotionally intelligent, we're able to see a lot more of these gray areas. We're able to stay more neutral, but this is sort of over time with practice. So I'm going to use the bicycle analogy to show you what I mean about focusing on what's wrong. Let's say that you decide to go for a bike ride and you're afraid of hitting a pothole. And you're afraid that if you hit the pothole, you're going to fall and you're going to get hurt. So this is now your brain's like thinking, okay, pothole equals pain. So you're starting to look around and see the potholes. And as you see them, you get afraid, you get nervous. So you start to stare more at the potholes, and pretty soon on your beautiful bike ride, all you're seeing is potholes, and the experience that you're having is one of fear and anxiety. And then you end up getting exactly what you don't want by hitting the pothole. So what you want to do instead, what bikers do, they know that they can acknowledge that there's a fear. Yes, if I hit that pothole, I'd probably get hurt. But they're able to then rise above the fear and say, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the clear path around the pothole, and then I won't hit the pothole. So they're just not even focusing on the pothole again. They're focusing on this small area of clear path around it, and the bicycle naturally goes around the clear path. Notice that the next time you ride a bike, if you're trying to hit something, if you stare at it, you'll hit it. If you're trying to, go around something, look at the ground around the obstacle, and your bike will naturally go there. It just follows your mind. It's the same thing with focusing on what's negative. So when you focus on what you do want instead of on what you don't want, you can achieve your goals more easily. So focus on what you do want, not on what you don't want. Focus on what you do want. So how do we use strengths-based coaching with our participants? There are lots of ways we're going to talk about. One is the assessments I spoke of earlier. There are some free ones that you can do, and we have those in the resources at the end. But there's one that I have used that's called Cultural Transformation Tools, and I give you the link at the end through the Values Center. And it's just a fun, free test that you can sit down with your participant, go online. It takes 3 minutes to do the test, and it gives them a sense of their strengths in terms of values, what they really care about. So then you can use that as you're helping your participant plan their goals or overcome obstacles. You can say, well, your values are humor, community, teams, that kind of thing. So what can we do? How can we bring more of that in as you're working toward this goal? And then you talk with your participant about what we've just spoken about. Talk with them about what are their strengths and skills. What do they know about? How can they use those to achieve the goals that they want to achieve? They may have been using those strengths and skills in a way in the past that hasn't worked for them, but the strengths and skills and knowledge are there, they're foundations. Now they can use those to create what they do want. So why don't you have your participant write on a piece of paper, write their strengths on the piece of paper and carry it with them. Another study that I just saw that really impressed me was that they took two groups of people and they had them consider both positive and negative thoughts. And they had one group take the thought, write it down, and tear it up, and then write it down, leave it on their desk, and then write it down and put it in their pocket. So those were, I'm sorry, three groups. So one group tore the paper up, one group wrote it down and left it on their desk, and one group wrote it down and put it in their pocket. And at the end of the study, they found that no matter whether the thought was positive or negative, the people who carried it around with them believed it more, were more attached to the thought at the end of the study period. So let's use that to our advantage. Let's see if that works. Have them write down their strengths, fold it up, and put it in their wallet. And see if they just helps them to focus on what they're good at. This is just an example of the personal values assessment that you get through the cultural transformation tools I talked about. And it again, you just pick 10 values from this list of the things that are most important to you right now, the things you care most about. And then as a coach, you try to help them bring those values into what they're doing and have them use those to support themselves. So how to use CBC again, strengths-based coaching. We talked about introducing the idea of strengths and positivity to your client, talking to them about what we've been speaking here, talk to them about focusing on what's right and what's working and how to get more of that rather than less of what's not working. Let's say, for example, you've got a client who's having a rough time in a relationship with their ex and they're fighting all the time. We'll have them talk about the conversation, have them say, remember a time when things went well, even a small thing went well, and say to them, well, what is that? What worked? And how can we do more of that? So find even a small ember in a huge bonfire, but find a small ember of something that's working. 1% out of the 100% is actually working. Take that 1% and blow on it until it becomes a flame. What can we do to do more of that rather than less of what's not working? Get them to focus away from the fire of what's not working and on the ember of what is. Redirect the mind from focusing on what's wrong, and that takes constant, patient work. And we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. We're going to talk about doing that using questions. Curiosity to me is a brilliant coaching tool, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And celebrate even your small success. So find an ember of what's working, blow on that ember until it becomes a flame, redirect the mind from focusing on what's wrong, use curiosity, which we're going to talk about right now, and celebrate even the small successes. Even a tiny little thing they said they were going to do that they do, celebrate. So curiosity is the key here. Curiosity to me is one of the most powerful tools I have in my arsenal, both for my own life and working with clients. When I get really curious, I am able to suspend my own judgments. I'm able to suspend what I think I know and instead open my mind and my heart to really learning and exploring and growing from my interactions with other people or from my interactions with the world. I'm less likely to shut down and close myself down and get really defensive and negative if I'm just going, this is interesting. I wonder what I can learn from this experience. I wonder what this experience is here to teach me, even if it's something really uncomfortable. So in the past with the coaching skills, we learned in the beginning the skill of listening versus advising as a coach, that you listen more ask open-ended questions instead of telling your client what to do or nagging at them or holding them accountable all the time. Instead, just really asking and listening and feeding back to them what you're hearing. That even though that's hard for us as coaches because we want to advise, and as mentors especially, we're like here because we did it right and we want them to do it right and we want to help them do it right and we want their lives more than they do a lot of times. So this is our challenge as mentors to sit back and listen. At the heart of that skill of listening is curiosity. I wonder. I wonder why that person is thinking this way. I wonder what's possible here. When we ask questions with curiosity at the heart, where I am truly curious to find out more, as I find out more, my client finds out more. And it invites my participant, my client, to self examine and come up with their own answers. So let's just take that in for a second. Listen, advise, wonder. It's hard, it's challenging, it's against our human nature. It's against why we became mentors in the first place, because we really want to help. And to really sit back and say, I'm your coach. This is what I say in a coaching relationship. I'm your coach. I don't know if I can help you or not. I want what you want. I want what you want as much as you want it. So my job is to bring the strengths out in you and to enable you, regardless of what happened in your past and regardless of what's happening in your external world, to say, what is the most powerful action step I can take right now towards the vision that I have for my life, towards my dream? What's one tiny little step that I can take? And that's my job as a coach. So here are some questions that might help as you are working with your client. Questions that are curious, that help you expand on curiosity. What do you want the end result to look like? Use that in the example I used of somebody who's fighting with their ex. Well, what would you like a perfect relationship with your ex to look like? What would it look like? What would a conversation go like? Let's just really imagine that. And then how do you know? How will you know when you get there? How will you know when this relationship is working the way you want it to work? So you get them to really look at those things and dig deep and even try to imagine that space around the pothole. If they're thinking about this negative relationship, they're going into it imagining the pothole, and they're just going to get more pothole. So you want to help them say, well, how would might it be different? What if it was perfect? What would it look like? What did it look like when you first met her? How did your conversations go then? So where do we go from here? Or what worked for you the time that it was working? And how can you do more of what worked? So just these are some examples of open-ended questions that you ask, and then you just get really, really curious about what they come up with, and keep asking questions and go deeper and have them go deeper. All right, so here's your takeaway from today's session. First of all, the strengths-based coaching comes from the positive psychology movement, or I would actually say that the positive psychology movement might have come from coaching, because I think coaching has always been strengths-based. It's always been focused on the present and future and a lot less on the past, and creating opportunities and looking for openings. Um, but positive psychology has lent a research-based, science-based body of knowledge to it, and it showed that when we do focus on the strengths, that we increase self-esteem and we make achieving goals easier. The whole reason that we need to have a positive psychology movement or strengths-based coaching is that it's natural for humans, especially Western humans, to focus on what's wrong. And our brains do that naturally by scanning the environment for what's wrong, but then we attach to the thoughts that come in there. Something's wrong, something's not working, and then we attach to that, and then we get fearful, and then we take action steps that aren't as powerful as they could be. So what you focus on, you create. Whatever you focus on, you create more of. Focus on the pothole, you get more potholes. Focus on the space around the potholes, you get more space. So instead of focusing on what you don't want, try to focus on what is working and how to get and do more of that. That's your takeaway, your little 4 points that you can print out and keep handy to remind you of the main points of positive psychology. If you want to read more, if you want to learn more about this movement, there's just tons and tons of stuff. I've only put 4 things on here. The 4, I think, really helpful people to read on this, and they're all men, interestingly. Martin Seligman, he's the professor at the University of Pennsylvania. There's a whole positive psychology certificate program. There's a master's program. I think there's probably a PhD. I'm not sure. Anyway, his book Authentic Happiness is a good place to start, and he's written a lot of books. Robert Holden is a coach who's written a book called Authentic Success, which is really liberating and wonderful and very easy to read for our own personal growth as well as working with our mentees. Then there's a whole series, science called Appreciative Inquiry by Cooper, Ryder, and Whitney. And that appreciative inquiry is used a lot in business. It's used in community groups, ways of organizing meetings that are focused on positive. So that's also very, very helpful, especially if you're doing any facilitation in your work or any kind of group work. And then the Now Discover Your Strengths 2.0 is a mass market business book that when you buy it's Buckingham developed an assessment called StrengthsFinders, which is used a lot in business. You can again become certified as a StrengthsFinders facilitator. But if once you buy the book, then you get a online URL to take your test, and you get like a 34-page report on your strengths, and you'll find out what your own strengths are with the book. So then the final one is for the values assessment I showed you, the cultural transformation tools, that you copy this URL here and paste it into the browser, and it'll take you to the personal values assessment, or just go to valuecenter, spelled with an RE because they're from Britain.com, valuecenter.com, and click around until you find the individual personal values assessment. It's free. You just have to give them their email so they can send you the results, but it's a really great company. So that's it. Focusing on the strengths, strengths-based coaching.